Yeah, thrilled to be joined by Tony Haig, the CEO of PP Control and Automations. Tony, firstly, hopefully you can hear us okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, morning, Neil.
Good morning, good morning. So first up, you and I have been working together for a number of years now, but we wonderful just to quickly hear a bit about yourself and about the company.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, morning, everybody. Yes, so my name is Tony Haig. I'm the CEO of a company called PP Control and Automation. Basically, we're a contract manufacturing company. We supply strategic outsourcing solutions to some of the world's largest OEMs and machinery builders. We're a business based in the West Midlands, a little place called Chesley and Hay, which most people have never heard of, stuck between Walsall and Cannock. We employ 230 people. And I've been at the business for close on 20 years. Joined as sales and marketing director back in 2001.
Yeah, and when we first met, I think it was after you'd actually read Scaling Up and you kind of seen it as a framework to really grow out your business. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, it's one of those sort of almost accidental moments, really. Came across a Scaling Up book along with a few other business books that we'd read. It probably, I think it sat in, if I'm honest, it probably sat on my study desk for a little bit longer than it should, probably gathered a little bit of dust. And maybe on some wet Sunday afternoon when there was nothing on the telly, I decided just to pick it up. And I think it's one of those books that within an hour or two, it just resonated. I mean, at the point of reading the book back in, I think it was 2017, we'd grown the business from sort of 4 million to 20 million-ish, with a desire to get the business to sort of 40 million and above. But we really didn't have a framework. We had the intent, we had the wish, we had the desire. We recognised what had got us from 4 million to 20 million wasn't going to get us from 20 million to 40 million. We knew we needed to do something different, learn new skills, have new tools. And the book spoke about businesses that reach a glass ceiling, and I thought that was us. And I thought, so Scaling Up, the reading the book was a catalyst of, I guess, shaping some thought up.
Yeah, and again, part of the attraction working with yourselves as well is you've got this fervent belief that unlocking your growth potential is what's going to take you from where you are to where you want to get to. And I think one of the first things we got to work on were really helping discover your core values. Now, you've done some work on that already, but why do you think core values are the essence of any growth business?
Core values literally define everything, Neil, for everybody in the organisation, employees, stakeholders, customers, suppliers. It upholds our beliefs, how we live, how we breathe within work, and everybody, is accountable for living up to those values, and everybody's including myself. I think what was more important about the core values is how you derive them. The core values weren't decided by me or the directors or the management team and communicated to the employees and said, right, guys, that's our core values from Monday, please observe them. The core values were created by the employees. We engaged with them, we spoke with them, we asked them what it meant to them about working at PP. We asked everybody to come up with suggestions, and we had literally hundreds and hundreds of ideas. We distilled them down, then distilled them down again, put them back out to the employees. So from having hundreds of phrases and sentences and views, we sort of distilled it down over many weeks, and basically ended up with the 10 core values that we then put into the 5 areas that you see there. And it just communicates the culture of the organisation.
Yeah, and I think that one that we probably hone on more than any other value, and I know Stuart talked about it and Leon has talked about it, is this commitment to learning, this notion that if you are going to grow out, fundamentally, you have to have this commitment to learning. It starts at the very top.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we founded our own training school back in 2001, and we always had a firm focus on training and development in the organisation. But I realised what was missing is all of our training was aimed sort of bottom up. So a lot of the, not just technical training, but process training around 5S, Lean, Six Sigma, theory of constraints. We did lots of training, but it was really sort of, say, almost shop floor up to middle management. The one thing that was really missing was the need for development and coaching at the top of the business, in the boardroom and down. So that was a realization again back in 2017, really, when picking up the scaling up book, and then I guess finding you after a number of months, but after reading the book. So yeah, but it's absolutely vital. I mean, we're going to talk about 10xing your business. Well, you can't 10x your business until you 10x your people, and coaching and learning and development is at the very centre of that.
Yeah, I think that leads us nicely on to the fact that throughout today, we just keep coming back to that notion. If you want to really grow out your business, then you've got to 10x yourself. And I think you realize as well as a CEO, you need to 10x yourself. Your skills you need to build out as a CEO to serve your team well, were really important.
Absolutely. I mean, being the CEO of a £20 million business is different from requirements of being the CEO of a £40 million business. The ownership of the business was also changing. So we'd gone from being, during that process of scaling up, we'd gone from being privately owned to having some investment from a permanent private equity business. So that changes the dynamics of the organization. And you're absolutely right. It's, I'm still amazed by how many managing directors, CEOs I meet that believe that training and development is for everybody apart from them. And I don't necessarily think it's ego, although I have met some people that might apply to. But at the end of the day, I was the first to recognise that I needed coaching as much as anybody else, and I think it's vital for if a business is going to go forward, that the MDs and the business leaders recognise that fact.
And you uniquely, you're a coach as well. I mean, you're a coach.
Yes.
From sort of an athlete, sort of gymnastics and that world. So you get the understanding of both in the sporting analogy on the sporting area and in the boardroom that both are absolutely critical.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's having that critical observer, Neil, somebody that's not directly involved in the business and therefore has a direct vested interest in the P&L at the end of the month or the sales forecast at the end of the quarter, but someone that's close enough to the business but can also be completely objective and say the things to you that perhaps other people wouldn't say to you, but in a non-threatening, non-judgmental way, really, that people can take on board. And I think I remember you and I have discussed a number of different books that we've read in the business over a number of years, but I think Seven Temptations of a CEO was always an interesting read, and I thought I could probably rewrite the book and make it 10 or 12. But yeah, it's self-awareness.
It is, and I think now you've sort of really championed the fact that in order to move from 25 million to 40 million and from beyond towards your big heritage goal we'll come on to in a minute, that you really need to have a coaching culture that pervades right across the organization.
That's right, top to bottom. And I think that's our journey now. As I said, we've always had a culture of continuous investment, learning, development. It's now taken to that next level and understanding what coaching actually is. Not just the training in the classroom, not just the sort of process training, but it's really sort of developing that. It's taken it to a more strategic level. I mean, you're part of that journey with us now, and that's what will ultimately see us through to enable us to reach our BHAGs.
Yeah, and I think one of the other books that we've kept coming back to time and time again is this notion of good to great for Brimfield Collins. And it's no surprise again that Burns, I can probably reference an awful lot in scaling up. And again, that's been a really good sort of add-on, if we want a better word, to scaling up. And I know we've got a lot of principles that come out of that.
Absolutely, good to great, and I think Great by Choice as well, which was an equally sort of challenging book. But yeah, I mean, I think that I'm sure most people on this Zoom call, most have read some of the Jim Collins work. And I just think it applies. It's it's the sort of books that you read that you'll just take something from, no matter what your business is. Some of the points that are made, some of the thought-provoking ideas that you'll take out of it, they'll just apply, and you want to get back into your business and share it with everybody. The one thing I'd say with books like this is, if you can read them as a group, so don't just necessarily read them in isolation. But a lot of our success has come from the management team, the directors sharing books, reading books together, meeting up, discussing, what they took from it, their interpretation of different things. And it's the dialogue that happens after read, because I'm sure you're the same, Neil. You can read a book once and you interpret it a certain way. You can actually read it for a second time. Only a few weeks later, you'll take something else from it. And that's the same with different people reading the book. So, yeah, brilliant books, and you know that we keep coming back to them time and time again.
Yeah, no. And I think, from that, one of the key areas that Jim Collins continually drills into us, if you want to build an enduring great organization, not just one for the short term, but one that's built to last, is this notion that disciplined people, very much Leon touched on that, and Stuart's touched on that as well, having disciplined thought, and then, as John Bunting's going to talk about a bit later on, about then this notion of disciplined action. It doesn't actually sound that glamorous or sexy, discipline, but I think if you want to get this notion of becoming an enduring great organization, that discipline is so important. How difficult has that been for you, Tony, just to instill in yourself and then across the team, this notion of this discipline and this disciplined people thought, disciplined action?
It's not easy. I think, Neil, as you said, I think it's something. It's a journey. When we started looking at it, and there was a couple of books that we read in particular. I remember 5 Dysfunctions of a Team in particular. I think that was a bit of a breakthrough book for us when we read that as a team, because the team's been together quite a long time, the senior team, the exec team. We had a few new players come onto it as well, a couple of new directors that joined the business. And I think 5 Dysfunctions, again, it was the right book, the right discussions came out of it at the right time for us as a whole organisation, myself included. As you said, having the right, and I've caught part of Leon's presentation, having the right people on the buzz, dealing with the C players, not putting off difficult decisions about people, the team understanding each other, developing that trust as a team, equally having that vulnerability. That goes to me too. Just because I'm the CEO, I haven't got all the answers. I don't pretend to have all the answers. So I think all of that put us on that journey. And I mean, I would say it took us from first picking up 5 Dysfunctions, which probably was now 18 months ago, I'm guessing. Yeah. I would say it's taken us 18 months to get, from picking up that book to now getting the teams operating in a way that they are completely trustworthy of each other. They've got nothing to share, nothing to hide. They're happy and comfortable being vulnerable in situations. And one thing we also did, as we did all of the DISC profiling for the directors and management team. And so we shared those with each other. We discussed them so we understood each other's behaviours, each other's traits, and how we communicate with each other. And all of that came through.
Just for the uninitiated, you mentioned DISC profiling. What is DISC profiling?
The psychometric profiling techniques, basically. So, we're all very different in our makeup. And if I look around the director, just the board of directors, and as we're all different characters. We've all got our little unique traits, myself included, and it's just understanding what makes each other tick fundamentally, and by understanding the DISC profiles and the traits of each other in a more open way. Again, it's that vulnerability piece. We can moderate and manage the way that we communicate with each other, and that's really important.
Yeah, and but it was probably about 12 months ago that then Jim published this sort of monologue to Good to Great, and actually there's a chapter within Good to Great which was a really sort of start to reference the flywheel, but it's really caught our attention 12 months ago to try and then figure out what were the component parts that were going to allow us to have that disciplined thought, that disciplined thinking, which really was then able to accelerate the growth. So what Jim Collins sort of talked about across the different chapters of Good to Great, this notion that Tony's just been talking about, this level 5 leadership, humility, but then underpinned by a deep professional will to achieve great things. As Leon touched on, first 2 and then what around that. And then that sort of leading towards what Jim talked about is the hedgehog concept. We're going to come on to that in a second. But once you've got your hedgehog concept really understood, what is it that grows your, like your business model, right at the heart of your business model, is if you get that really clear, then the breakthrough then really comes, and that's where the flywheel can really accelerate that around. So again, just to reiterate the points he's making, that it comes from these notions here that and equally this notion about our own self-discipline that's so important. And when you've got disciplined people, you don't need your bureaucracy. You can do away with that. When you don't have disciplined people or you don't have disciplined processes, then your bureaucracy is allowed to reign supreme. And that's this whole notion that couple that culture of discipline and then this ethic of entrepreneurship really is what we've suddenly moved on to over the last 6 months, isn't it? In terms of, I think Leon just touched on it, humanocracy. Just again, talk to us about why this whole notion of humanocracy really resonates with you and what we're starting to do to move forward on that basis.
I think there's another one of those books that we picked up and read, and I think we all find the concept fascinating. You know that I have a view that certain elements of humanocracy might not be quite as practical to apply in all businesses but there was wonderful case studies in there about stripping away the whole bureaucratic sort of culture in a business, creating mini teams, decentralizing decision-making processes. And for our organization, we're looking to scale. We've got some high growth plans over the next 18 months, 2 years. And it's actually given us some real firm ideas about how we can actually change the organizational structure to enable to really harness the energy, the passion and the capabilities of the teams around us to do just that in a more decentralized manner. I mean, and one thing that we did realize when we first looked at humanocracy, we looked at just how many layers of people there were between the shop floor and myself. And I think I'm almost embarrassed to say, I think it was fundamentally about 10 or 11, which sounds absolutely crazy. So I think our BMI, as we called it back then, our bureaucratic mass index was somewhere around 11. I think we're now down to a 6 or a 7, so we've leaned ourselves up a little bit. So I think the first thing is it just makes you realise what bureaucracy can do to a business, and it will hold the business back. There's just no doubt about it. And humanocracy, I think, will give people ideas of what they can practically implement in their business. As I said, they haven't got to go the whole hog and do a hire necessarily, but there's practical steps in there that you can take to empower your teams. That's what it's really all about, Neil, isn't it? Empower your teams, take the shackles off them.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's about really giving the team their brains back, and it's recognizing everybody has got so much to give if you allow them to do that. So it's really exciting that we're going to get to work on that. Probably one of the first organizations in the UK that really will be a sort of case study to embrace this and to see that. I think you mentioned Nucor in America and Hiab in China around that. But before we came on to humanocracy, we spent about probably 15, 18 months ago to get to work on what Jim Collins talks about, his sort of hedgehog principle. In essence, what the hell's a hedgehog principle? Well, I think from Aesop Fables, you've got the sort of notion of the fox and the hedgehog. The fox does lots of things not necessarily well. The hedgehog does one thing really well and sort of managed to defend itself from the fox. So it really is about what you're deeply passionate about, what drives your economic engine, and what can you be the best in the world at. And I think when we started to do this, you came back, and I think, and one of the things that resonated with yourself, given that you're in the outsourcing industry, that your purpose or your mission was almost to make outsourcing easy. Why was that so important to you?
I think it was just that, again, that moment of when you start going through the whole process of developing your thoughts, to start developing the whole flywheel. It gets you down to sort of simplifying everything, doesn't it, Neil? So it takes away the clutter, back to hedgehog versus foxes fundamentally. So the whole thing for us, when we spoke to our clients, I mean, anyone that goes into outsourcing, there's risk involved. There can be emotions involved as well as sort of practical risk. Fundamentally, by outsourcing, the company's releasing what they were doing internally and finding a third-party partner to do that for them. So there's commercial business and emotional thought and energy goes into that. And we realized, talking to our customers and prospective customers at the time, all they wanted was a safe pair of hands and just make the whole process easy and as risk-free as possible. and it just gave us that so again that very simple notion. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think what you then have is you come out and I've kept you one of your secret sources. So you do this exercise is you kind of figure out what your drives your economic engine. I've just taken that bit out. It's almost like your secret sauce. But I think what you then came out with, as Jim talks about, this big, hairy, audacious goal that kind of gets the hair on the back of your neck down here, that drives you towards greatness. I think there's a Jim that talks about. So just give us a bit of an insight as to why your big, hairy, audacious goal and how's that driving your growth.
Well, we set our 3 HAG and our 5 HAG up that you're aware of. So, the first part of our growth plan was to get the business, our 5 HAG, past the sort of 40 million mark. But 100 million just sounds like such a lovely number, doesn't it? It's just great. I mean, we're already one of the largest outsourcing, well, we probably are now the largest outsourcing business of our type in the UK and one of the biggest in Europe. But just to be that 100 million plus revenue, because it's almost the time of doing that, we're 20 odd million pound business. You're thinking, hang on, that's 5 times where we are now. It is doable. It focused everybody around it. So for us, 100 million plus revenue, that's what we need to go for. Have a global footprint. Currently, we're a UK business. We're planning, as you know, some strategies around North America. And we just want to become the #1 partner of choice for the OEM machine building sectors for outsourcing and get past that 100 million mark. And we'll get there.
Yeah, and then the other nice thing about having a big, hairy, audacious goal, it sets down not only your path of greatness, but it attracts other people who want to come and be part of this thing. Really sets out that notion. So the final thing I just want to sort of speak about today, because we could speak around strategy forever. There's so many things that we could hone in terms of getting really clear on the value proposition and really clear in terms of our differentiators and those things. But I think as we looked at this again, probably as a team about 12 months ago. And so we're just going to sort of, again, for the benefit of everyone on the call today, just give a few minutes now, just talking about the flywheel. And I think what Jim did, he has a laboratory. Jim has a laboratory out in Boulder in Colorado. And probably back in the late 90s, Amazon and Jeff Bezos, came along to one of his laboratories. And I think that, as fame would have it, Jeff Bezos on a napkin, when he was trying to challenge around the flywheel, scribbled out what we can see on the screen right now. You knew that, if he was able to build out just from books, well, okay, that's for books, but you have more of a selection. We get more from books, so we can actually bring in consumables and garden furniture and stuff like that. Then we're able to give our customers a better experience. And he knew as well that those things like the customer experience, just as Tony just talked about, making things easy. So just having one click, one click makes it fabulously easy. By having that notion that it's easier to go and buy online and it comes quickly to my door and stuff like that, I'm going to get more traffic. More traffic comes to my site, then what that does is increase the demand of people who want to sell more stuff onto my platform. More sellers onto my platform equals more selection, improves the customer experience, and that flywheel starts getting bigger. A bit later on, a couple of years later, he built out a bit more from his flywheel. And actually, you know what? Probably it's one thing having this, but actually if we have a lower cost structure, so we're able to take costs out of business, get bigger distribution warehouses, more systemization processes. In doing that, we can lower prices. That's giving us a better customer experience. So he kind of then really used that as the flywheel to catapult Amazon into this huge successful organization it is today. It wasn't always that way, but it is today. I've just put this other one up because it resonates with we've done some work with in Derby. It's almost identical. As many of you will have heard of Hoob, certainly those of you who are on the call today from Derby. And what Dino Jackson, the CEO of Hoob, is invent great products. They wetsuits and was where they started. Fundamentally, then he sponsored the Brownlee brothers, Alistair and Johnny Brownlee, back in 2012 in the London Olympics. They wore Hoob wetsuits, which in turn, when they got the gold and silver, or gold and bronze, I think it was, inspired the Weekend Warriors, people who love being able to replicate their things. By the Weekend Warriors, it attracted more mainstream customers, build up the power brand. He's able then to start moving up the prices. It in turn allowed to invest in more great products. So they're moving from just wetsuits to other things around triathlons on those things now. So it's a really good example. So when we looked at doing this just around 12 months ago, we went through this exercise. And typically when you're running a coaching session, you come to have an exercise, and we asked the team to really think about what are those sort of things, that replicable successes that they've achieved in the past, but also to dwell on the failures and disappointments. We all have them. What hasn't worked as we build out our flywheel, and then compare those successes to failures. And a bit like Jeff Bezos does, just then start to sketch that flywheel out. And our first iteration, when we started thinking about this is almost a year ago today, Tony.
So really? Okay.
It was the edit one we had up 24th of April 2020.
Okay.
And I think just you can talk to it actually about some of those successes that you captured. You talked about customer demands, consultative, solving their unique problems. Why was that important?
Yeah, I mean, just take at the top really. So, I mean, just to put into language, attract the right zebras. People think we might be barking mad. Just to clarify, zebras are our sort of it's our prospecting system for new sales, new clients. So it's based around a book called Selling to Zebras, which we came across many years ago, and that's how we define the attributes of what a good customer could look like. So from attracting the right type of customers, we were aware of the PP brand and how we develop trust with our clients. And again, the 4D process, that's our sales process. So it's a process that we've developed internally to take people through the sales funnel, basically, and how we filter each step of the way and how we sort of build up the sales funnel. Solutions, as an outsourcing business, everything we do is about solution selling. It's all about acting as a consultant with our customers, understanding their pain points, and then developing hopefully unique and clever outsourcing solutions that will solve their specific pain points. Then that building capability, getting the right results for the customer, more importantly, results that the customer can measure for themselves. So, we want our customers telling us that, yes, what we've come up with them works. It ticks the box. It does exactly what we said we were going to do. That builds, as we said before, it builds relationships. You get long-term relationships out of that, and you continue to make that customer's life easier. And that's the start of our flywheel.
Yeah, and I think we probably, from that starting point a year ago today, there was quite a good few months of refinement and continue to working this through to the flywheel that we just put on the screen today. So, and I think this is the flywheel that is now designed to accelerate the growth of the company from where we are today to that 100 million big, hairy, audacious goal around that. So I think be useful now is to then start thinking about, once you've gone through the sort of the theory, as it were, applied this and stuff like that, is how you and the senior team have communicated this across the business, and different sort of actions or techniques you're using in order to improve each of those different elements, so that once, as you say, once you've turned that flywheel, and by default a flywheel is a heavy piece of kit to get moving, really difficult to get momentum and really difficult to push forward. But once you have got that flywheel turning and turning faster and faster, it creates momentum of its own.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of communication, when we finalize the flywheel, we have lots of communication methods in the business. We communicate each element of the flywheel continuously to all employees. It's also part of training with new employees that come into the business, so they're aware of the flywheel as part of it ties very nicely back to our core values as well, just how you keep communicating it, living it, breathing it. If you look at our OPSP, our strategy in the organization for growth, it's obviously the flywheel's at the heart of it. If you look at our marketing strategy that we work with our marketing agencies, everything's there in terms of developing the brand and how developing that trusted brand, and writing white papers and being seen as an industrial company with the right credentials, as I said before, just engaging on social media that attracts new potential clients. So I mean, everything we fundamentally do ties into one of those 6 key areas. When we engage with a new customer, we want to make their lives easy. So we've done a lot of work about how we can design tools and techniques to make that process as risk-free and as pain-free for the client as possible. So yeah, it's at the heart of everything we do, Neil. But you're right. It's looking at that on the screen now. It's 6 coloured boxes stuck around a logo, and you'd think that probably took us about 30 minutes to come up with. That was weeks and weeks of discussion and dialogue, and sometimes argument over crystallizing it right down, distilling it right down into those 6 key areas.
Yeah, I think interestingly for a manufacturing company, we've got other manufacturing's online, but I think you are unique in many respects is the way that you are building out your brand on social media. You're using and leveraging that with your marketing support companies to do that. Why do you think becoming a trusted brand is so important at the very top of the flywheel?
What I find now is that when we engage with any new potential clients, they already know who we are. They've come across us, they're aware of us. And I think, as I said before, outsourcing by the definition of what a company is doing in manufacturing carries an amount of risk. Therefore, if you're the right sort of company that they can see right from the off, and they've got firm belief that the fact that you're doing this for other large global OEMs, it just gives them that sense of comfort right from the very beginning, Neil, that actually you're the sort of company that they want to work with. You're going to listen to what they're going to say. You're going to act in a consultative manner. You're going to do the right things. It just creates that level of confidence right from the very first engagement.
Yeah, I think the other thing I just want to touch on as well, because I think John will also pick up on this notion that, you want to attract the right zebras, but how have you gone and what improvements have you made to ensure that you are an easy to work with organization? If your heart, your mission, your purpose is you want to make outsourcing easy, just give us some examples of sort of the work that you've done around that area.
I think part of it actually is just having the rigorous discipline around the sort of processes we had in place. And part of that also is recognizing customers that aren't a good fit for us and having the honesty that, we get a lot of interest in our business. And I would say out of every 10 inquiries that come into PP, one of them or two of them may be the sweet spot for us. So I think first of all, it's having that openness with clients right from the very beginning, listening to them, and making sure that we're a good fit from the very beginning. Because if we're not a good fit, it'll go horribly wrong, and we'll all invest a lot of time and money and effort into something that ultimately won't get anybody the right result. So I think we've got all the processes in place, Neil. I think you touched upon the words earlier about discipline. It's just maintaining that level of discipline between us and the client, and levels of communication from the very off, creating the right teams, the right project teams from the very beginning, making sure communication is regular, it's open. Again, there's trust from the very beginning. It's just doing the right things,
isn't it? Yeah, you're so right. And I just almost a final point I just want to touch on is this notion of communication. This communication of as a leader. We've talked about it many times that you got to communicate to you're red in the face until you land that message through with your team. Just what sort of different communication modules or different communication sort of modes have you been using just to make sure that you're absolutely on message the whole time? You're reinforcing where you're heading and why you're heading there.
I think you've used a phrase before that CEO's job is sort of chief communication officer, really, or chief repetition officer, I think is another phrase. And if you've said it enough times, then double up and do it again, really. My job as CEO is really to ensure that we have really clear, concise communication all the way through the business, and never ever think you've communicated enough. And you mentioned before that I had 12 years in coaching sports with children, And I always say that the danger of communication is the illusion that's actually been achieved. And it's sometimes that you'll communicate something or say something, and you believe that the person on the receiving end fully understands it. The first thing to do is ask them what you've just said. And what you'll often find is what they've interpreted is something completely different to what you were trying to put across. So, I mean, in terms of communication techniques, I mean, one thing that we started some time ago, as you know, was a CEO blog. So that's something I got into the habit of doing every single week. Literally just putting out a blog to all the employees. We did it digitally, online, by email, and in print, just to all the way, literally keeping everybody in the loop. And that wasn't to replace face-to-face communication, talking to people on the shop floor, etc. This was just something in addition. And we found it really beneficial, particularly last year. Because obviously through a global pandemic, we had some people not in the business, some people working from home, some people furloughed. And I think last year in particular, I think that there was a real need to over communicate last year through the pandemic, because a lot of people had their own individual concerns. And so it wasn't just that, doing the blogs, then it was picking up the phone, talking to people as well. And just to really laying out any feeds they've got. But it was really, I think with communication, and we all know there's not one right channel. You've got to go multi-channel, as I said, face-to-face, media. And when we couldn't do some of the seminars that we did, because we can't get everybody in the room together, we did video seminars and webinars. So again, we'd video ourselves, we'd put that out on social media, we put it out through the employees through links. So just keep communicating. Whatever you think you've done, it won't be enough.
So powerful, and I think building on this sort of notion that this series we want to continue on. This is we're going to have a much deeper dive into strategy on the 9th of June. Really picking up a lot of what Tony and I have just gone through over the last 30, 40 minutes or so. Again, helping you to really clarify and discover your core values, discover those strengths, weaknesses, and then importantly, those trends that are taking place in your market. What are the 3 to 5 year strategies that you'll need to hone in on in order to catapult your growth? We're going to spend a bit of time, just like we've been talking about over the last few minutes, helping you just begin to create that flywheel, get that onto the first bit of the napkin. Think about your brand promise. And then Tony touched on it again there about this notion of really crystallizing all your thinking onto one page, a one-page strategic plan that really becomes the kind of the whole model that takes you forward. So Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. I think whenever you've got a practitioner who is embracing these things, it really embellishes the conversation. If you just have one final sort of takeaway about the importance of coaching and all those sort of things just before we go into the breakout room, what would your sort of final bit of thinking or advice be?
I think all I'd ever say is it's all about people first. I mean, you can invest in automation, invest in process, invest in everything, but fundamentally people are at your heart of your business. And we all know and accept that. And it's just having a strategy and a process in place that covers all of that, from whether it's recruitment. And I think I think it was Leon that referred earlier to a book called Who, which we came across. So we threw up job descriptions and went to scorecards and changed the way that we interviewed and recognized actually we're not very good at recruitment because we don't really have a process for it. So it starts out all the way through your business. Just have a people strategy. Companies have sales strategies, they have marketing strategies, they have a production strategy. How many companies have a people strategy?
Yeah.
So that would be my one-liner.